In March 2019, a coastal ranger working for the Cornwall Wildlife Trust walked a familiar stretch of cliff path above Kynance Cove, on the far southwestern tip of England. She was conducting a routine vegetation survey, recording the usual cast of wind-flattened gorse and salt-tolerant grasses. Then she stopped. Growing from a crevice in the Serpentine rock, at a height of roughly 2 meters, stood a columnar cactus. Its ribbed green stem was the width of a fence post. Its spines were pale yellow and arranged in clusters of 8. It was not a garden escapee dropped from someone's pocket. It was rooted, established, and, by the look of its base, had been there for several years. She photographed it, logged the GPS coordinates, and sent the image to the botanical recorder for West Cornwall. It was identified within 48 hours. The plant was Pachycereus pringlei, Pa-Ki, Seer, E, Us, Pringlei, I, the cardon cactus of the Sonoran Desert. It had no business being there, and yet there it was. This is not a story about one eccentric plant clinging to a Cornish clifftop. It is a story about what happens when a desert organism turns out to be far more adaptable than any ecological model predicted, and about the quiet, largely unnoticed, naturalization of a species the size of a telephone pole along one of Britain's most surveyed coastlines. The paradox sits at the center of it. A plant built to survive 40-degree heat and 4 months without rain is now, in small but multiplying numbers, surviving Atlantic winters in a country famous for its damp. No one planned this. No one is certain how far it has already spread. The cardon cactus entered European horticultural consciousness in earnest during the late Victorian period. Botanical collectors working in Baja California and the Sonoran Desert of northwestern Mexico began shipping specimens to the great glass houses of Britain and continental Europe in the 1880s and 1890s. Kew Gardens received its first documented Pachycereus pringlei specimen around 1894, and by 1910 the plant was a fixture in the collections of private estates across Cornwall, Devon and the Scilly Isles, places chosen precisely because their mild oceanic climate allowed exotic plants to survive outdoors in sheltered positions. The Isles of Scilly, which sit 35 miles off Land's End and record some of the mildest winter temperatures in the United Kingdom, became a particular stronghold for horticultural experimentation with Mexican and Canarian succulents during the Edwardian era. For most of the 20th century, the cardon remained a curiosity in private gardens, unable to set viable seed in a climate without sufficient summer heat to ripen it. That barrier began to shift after 2000. The summers of 2003, 2018, and 2022 brought prolonged heat events to the southwest of England that pushed ground temperatures in south-facing rocky habitats above 32 degrees Celsius for stretches of 3 to 5 weeks. Botanical recorders began, cautiously at first, to log something new. Cardon seedlings appearing not in gardens, but in open serpentine and granite outcrops between Penzance and Falmouth, and along the north coast of the Scilly island of Tresco, near the boundary of the famous Abbey Garden. The biology of Pachycereus pringlei explains, with some precision, how this is possible. In its native range in Baja California and Sonora, Mexico, the cardon is the tallest cactus species on the planet. Mature specimens regularly exceed 18 meters in height and have been measured at weights exceeding 25 tons, the mass stored almost entirely as water within the accordion-like internal tissue. The lifespan of an established individual is estimated at 300 to 500 years. What makes the cardon relevant to a British coastal story is not its size, but its root architecture and its metabolic tolerance. The plant uses crassulation acid metabolism, or CAM photosynthesis, a biochemical strategy that allows it to keep its stomata closed during the heat of the day and open them only at night, dramatically reducing water loss. In coastal Cornwall, where morning mist and overnight dew provide consistent low-level moisture even in dry summers, this nocturnal uptake proves surprisingly effective. The root system spreads horizontally within the upper 15 to 30 centimeters of substrate, allowing the plant to exploit the shallow, fast-draining serpentine soils of the Lizard Peninsula with a speed that few competitors can match in that chemically hostile ground. Serpentine soil is low in calcium, high in magnesium, and toxic to most European native plants, which is precisely why it supports such a rare and specialized flora. The cardon, arriving without the evolved avoidance behaviors of those natives, appears to find the chemistry broadly neutral. Its seeds, roughly 1.2 millimeters in length, are dispersed by the same gulls and crows that frequent the coastal scrub, and germination trials conducted at the Royal Botanic Garden, Edinburgh, in 2021 demonstrated a germination rate of 71% for seeds stratified at 15 degrees Celsius, which closely matches the average soil temperature of a south-facing Cornish cliff face in late May. Stories like this one are happening right now, and almost no one is covering them. If you want to keep finding the quiet stories from the natural world that the news misses, subscribe to this channel. A new one every week. Dr. Imogen Trevose, a botanist at the University of Exeter's European Centre for Environment and Human Health, based in Penryn, has been tracking the population since 2020. In a 2023 paper published in the journal Botanical Journal of the Linnean Society, Trevose and her co-authors documented 47 individual plants established outside cultivated ground along a 3-8 kilometre coastal section between Porthleven and Coverack. Of those, 22 were classified as juveniles under 40 centimetres tall, indicating active ongoing recruitment from seed. The rate of establishment is accelerating. Trevose noted in a presentation to the British Ecological Society in November 2023, each reproductive adult can produce in excess of 2,000 seeds per flowering season, and we are now recording adults in this coastal population. The Botanical Society of Britain and Ireland has flagged the species for formal surveillance review. The IUCN, by contrast, lists Pachycereus pringlei as a species of least concern globally, owing to the vast intact populations in Baja California, some of which contain an estimated 23 million individuals. The British situation represents the opposite end of that spectrum. A species thriving in its homeland, beginning to establish uninvited in a country 7,000 miles away. The geography of the spread is not random. The populations identified so far cluster in 3 distinct zones. The Lizard Peninsula, in southwest Cornwall, holds the highest density of confirmed wild individuals, concentrated on south and southwest facing sea cliffs between 100 and 200 meters above sea level. The Isles of Scilly represent a second zone, where the Abbey Garden at Tresco has almost certainly acted as a seed source for at least 15 years. Recorders have found young plants on the uninhabited island of Samson, roughly 4 kilometers across open water. The third zone is more surprising. A small cluster of 5 plants was confirmed in October 2022 on the exposed coastal headlands of North Devon near Hartland Point, well outside the warmest microclimate zones, suggesting either a secondary dispersal event from an unknown garden source, or a tolerance for cold far beyond what the models assumed. And here is where the story resists a simple reading. The instinct, encountering a 2-meter Mexican cactus on a British sea cliff, is to reach for the language of biological invasion, to call it a threat, to begin the process of removal. But the ecologists working on this question are less certain than the headlines might suggest. Serpentine grassland on the Lizard Peninsula is one of the most internationally significant habitats in the United Kingdom, home to species such as the Cornish heath, Erica vagans, found naturally nowhere else on Earth. The concern is real, but Trevose and others have pointed out that the cardon, in its current numbers, is establishing primarily in bare rock crevices and eroded scree, not within the closed grassland sward where the most sensitive species grow. Whether that remains true as numbers increase is the open question. There is also an uncomfortable colonial inversion to consider. A plant taken from Mexico by Victorian collectors and grown in British gardens is now re-establishing itself in the wild without human intent, in a country that spent a century extracting the world's flora for its own pleasure. The ethics of removal are not as clean as they appear. Stand on the cliff above Kynance Cove on a calm morning in early summer, and the serpentine rock glitters green and red in the low light. The sea is the color of malachite. The wind comes in from the southwest carrying salt and something almost tropical on warm days, a humidity that feels borrowed from another latitude entirely. Somewhere in the rock, faces below the path, in crevices that hold heat long after dark, small green columns are thickening by a few millimeters each month. Not quickly. The cardon does not do anything quickly. In its home desert, it may spend its first decade as a low, inconspicuous stem no taller than a boot. It is patient in the way that stone is patient, storing and waiting. The adults that will eventually stand 2 or 3 meters high on this Cornish coast will have been germinating in the years around this decade. They will still be standing, if undisturbed, when people alive today are long dead. The rock they are rooting into was formed 380 million years ago. The cactus arrived last Tuesday, in geological terms, and still it is finding the gaps. Still, the seeds are moving on the wind, and through the guts of herring gulls along a coast that no one in 1894, when the first specimen arrived at Kew, could have imagined it would one day call its own. Share your thoughts below.